Hey, Andrew. Hey, Bernie. Let's wait for a few minutes there to add everybody. Cheers. Eat. Sorry, I'm encouraging my youngest son to eat. Shit. Sounds like a disagreement. Just me. I'm gonna wait here for another minute. Okay. Hey, Cody. Okay, I'm gonna start here. Okay. My apologies for last week. It was actually completely uncontrollable. There was a huge burning brush fire in Manoa, which, given that it's Manoa, I mean, I don't know, all the old people got freaked out, but we did lose power and internet, so I wasn't going to do a lecture by my phone. Yes, Pierce. Pierce, I'm talking. I'm doing my lecture. Okay. My apologies. I think we'll be okay, though, in terms of time. I'm actually a little bit more efficient doing things online because usually I'm behind schedule quite a few weeks, and so far I remain on schedule. I want to, for some of you who have me for the Tuesday class, the very first, let's say 10 or 20 minutes is going to be exactly the same, but that's only because of the topic for this week, which is inflation. It wasn't intended to be the topic for this week. We were actually going to have a different topic, but well, we were delayed. So we're going to be talking about inflation today, and I want to talk about the mystery of inflation in the data that's coming out. I want to talk a little bit about the Bloomberg market concepts, which I hope that many of you are working through or know how to work through it a little bit. Cody in our class, he is one of the individuals that can help any of you work through it. I can as well, but he's made a video to kind of walk you through the setting up process if you're not at that point. But again, I'm just gonna just do it one last time, just show people what it is, because it's going to be my expectation that for our class that we have the assignments, which we all agreed to do. So we have assignments that exist for each topic. In about 2 weeks, my lecture is going to be solely organized around going over those assignments and explaining why the answer is the answer that it is for each of them. So that would mean that I'll make the due date for those assignments right before that lecture. Again, it's not going to be for about 2 or 3 weeks, so don't like start worrying yet, but I'll tell you with enough lead time of when you need to start worrying. And then after that class, where I spend all the time talking about the homework assignments and what the answers are, it'll be at that point then that we will do the exam on La Lima, the multiple choice exam. And then after that point, I'm hoping we'll spend again a little bit more time on finishing up the Bloomberg market concepts material. And then we'll be past Halloween by that point. So, okay. Cody, are you going is anything for trick or treat this year, Halloween? Or are you not going at all?
I feel like Halloween's canceled.
I do too. Isn't that sad? It's my favorite holiday of the year, and it's canceled.
And it's falling on a Saturday with a full moon, apparently.
Oh man! Oh, it's like the perfect. It's like the perfect situation. Oh man. What about you, Claire? Is it your favorite holiday of the year? What's your favorite holiday?
I just use it as an excuse to dress up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not your favorite holiday.
Not really.
Oh man. What about you, Courtney? Is it your favorite holiday? Or no? I'm gonna guess it's a no, since you don't sound very enthusiastic about it. Andrew, you already seem like a person who probably doesn't care about trick or treat or Halloween. Is that right?
Only if I have to take my little nephews and stuff.
But see, but isn't that kind of cool, right? Like how excited they get about it, right? I mean,
yeah.
Or no? Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I got a little bit of inspiration there, right? Yeah. Yeah. Courtney says she doesn't like it, so yeah. What are you gonna? Yeah. When I think of like the other holidays, right, we'll miss out. So apparently, from an economics perspective, the loss of Halloween is quite severe. It's actually the second largest holiday that we spend money on is Halloween. So Christmas is obviously first, and then Halloween, and then I think Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving or Easter comes right after that in terms of spending. So it's a candy. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Angela, you don't like Halloween either? Come on. You did it as a kid though, right?
See, I feel as a kid, for everyone, it would be different, but now because we're all like in college and stuff, we're kind of like, Yeah,
you know what though? I think, see, for me, I really got into it in college. Like, I liked it as a kid. Then, like, in the high school years, I kind of like fell out of favor. I was like, oh, I'm not a kid anymore. Then, in college, I totally got back into it again. Now, granted, I wasn't a frat, so like that kind of like fueled it further, right? Because then everything is taken to the extreme. So yeah, obviously then something like Halloween is like, oh, you got to have a party and, all the things that come with that. So yeah, then at that point you're just, I don't know. And then I get to the Andrew principle of then having kids that really like it. But my wife insists on this thing where like we have to do coordinated costumes. So like one year, like when we only had one child, he wanted to go as a fireman. So then my wife dressed as a flame, and I dressed as like in a red shirt, and I put like white duct tape on it, so I looked like a brick house. that was a pretty cool year. But now with 2 kids, like, dude, I don't have time to do it. Okay. Let's go to, my apologies to my son's watching YouTube in the background, but it's because my other son is at piano, and it's the only way my child will be quiet long enough while I do this lecture. Okay. So today's topic is about inflation, which this is going to be our focus today. But, and it was again supposed to be our focus last week. But when I was thinking about it, that's why I wanted to just do the very beginning here of the lecture from my 398 class that's on Tuesdays, because it's actually relevant to what we're doing here. Just before I keep going on any further, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, excellent. Okay, so and obviously this is all being recorded and all that kind of stuff. Let this just be my reminder. I told the other classes, but it also applies to us as well. Now you, in this class, we only need to work on the first 4. That would be those first 4 modules. Now, again, you don't have to become a Bloomberg expert. You don't even have to be going into the system very much if you don't want to, if that's your thing. But I actually think you'll learn a lot about economics. You'll learn a fair deal about finance as well, which is kind of the marketable way of thinking of finance. But again, as I was indicating to my other class, many of you are seniors. Some of you are graduating this semester into a really highly, highly, highly competitive job market. And your situation in Hawaii is only complicated by the fact that as new undergraduates, you're competing against all the students at Manoa, right, who are gonna like slum it, right, and they'll be like, I guess we're gonna drive to Kapolei, right, whereas all y'all used to like own that territory because they wouldn't bother to even go west to go to work. But I mean, as one example, First Hawaiian Bank, all their data processing, all their back office activities, that's all done at their big office that's out in Kapolei. So there's certainly jobs that we once would think of are in town are actually on the west side. And, if you can say to First Hawaiian Bank, hey, I know how to use, I'm familiar with what Bloomberg is. I have a sense of like some of the basics of economics and finance. Even if you're not a business major, with this kind of thing, if you get this certification, you'll have something at least to talk about when you do the interview. But you'll probably also have something that most of the kids at Manoa don't have. Because they're really not pushing this, even though they have the same Bloomberg terminals, they're really not pushing it. And I am. Now, as an economist, I fully believe in incentivizing you. If you complete this by before the end of the semester, I will, depending on how many people do it, and by that I mean the more people that do it, the happier I am. If we get to a point where mostly everyone or nearly everyone or everyone has completed those first 4 modules, I will entertain waiving, meaning not doing the final exam. So there's certainly an incentive for all of you to be working on this. And you don't need to go into Bloomberg to be able to do it. You just need to be able to log in. I will share the video that Cody made about how to do it. And as I indicated here for everyone in my 398 class, this is really your goal. It's just to get certified. Starting off at that website, which many of you have. Okay. This is what I want to start looking at. Again, this is for my 398 class, but it obviously is our topic for this week, and that's inflation. Now, when you all took, when you all took Econ 131, and in the part of the lecture that I talk about today, we'll talk about the fact that we understand inflation typically through something known as the Consumer Price Index, CPI. And what that Consumer Price Index is it's a fixed basket. And I'll talk about this in the theory when I get to the actual chapter, but it's a fixed basket of goods, meaning whatever a household buys, it's assumed that they're going to keep buying that same quantity of goods no matter what the price. And basically, we look at that basket of goods that people are buying and we just add up what the price is over time. Now, what you see here is that when prices go up, that's what we know of as inflation. And so basically anything above 0 would be our inflationary range. Now, more concerning would be the time periods where prices are falling. And that would be at the points that are less than 0. And you can see that when a recession is severe enough, we'll see deflation as measured by the Consumer Price Index. And we can even have curious cases like this, which is about 2015, 2016, where everyone thought there was going to be a recession, but there wasn't. But everyone thought there was going to be one, leading to deflation. Now, the question, you know, when I see this chart, when I thought about this chart, I was a little confused. Well, I wasn't confused. I mean, but because I kind of knew what the answer was here. But if you look at it this way, is it the case that things around you right now are cheaper? Right? Just using your basic understanding of things. Right? Let's just take a survey here. What do you think, Andrew? If you wanted to buy Halloween costumes for your nephews, what do you think? Do you think the price is going to be higher or lower?
Higher. Oh wait.
Higher?
Yeah,
Or,
I can't.
What'd you say?
I can't see the screen though.
Oh, you can't see the screen.
Yeah.
That's bad if you cannot. Let me go back to this. That totally sucks if no one can see it. How can people see it?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, fuck, dudes. Sorry about that. I thought everyone could see this. Okay, well, let me go back to this. Certification, that's these things, these first 4 things would be the things to focus on in the Bloomberg market concepts. Sorry about that, everyone. And then here, goal certification, using that website. And then this was the slide I was talking about here. Consumer Price Index, CPI, fixed basket of goods. Periods where it's going up, inflation. Periods where it's going down, deflation. Deflation we tend to see in these recessionary time periods. And we see here in 2015, 2016, also some slight deflation, but probably because, well, not probably, because there was some fear of a recession coming, which didn't actually happen. So if I see this here, right, because this is the present right here, this is the present. It's saying that prices are going down nearly 5%. So my question was, So for you, Andrew, what do you think for your nephews? Are Halloween costumes based on this, and then also based on what you think is actually happening at the Halloween store? Do you think that prices are going to be higher, lower, or the same as compared to last year?
Wouldn't the store want to keep the price the same if it's deflating?
Yeah, they would want to, but then if you knew that prices were falling, why would you buy it, right? So that's the thing. Like, that's why deflation is so bad compared to inflation. When there's rampant deflation in the economy, everyone then says, listen, I know prices are going down. Why should I buy it now? I'm just going to wait till the future. So the economy keeps getting smaller and smaller as people keep delaying their purchases because of the way the prices keep going down. But think about it from supply and demand, right? I mean, I've got kids. They're not, they might protest a little bit, but there's no way I'm going to send them outside, right? I mean, it's like a fucking war zone out there, right? Like, why would I do that for a bunch of Snicker bars, right? Why wouldn't I just go to the store and buy like a big old bag, right? And just say, go to town, right? The experience of like walking around and doing it, yeah, I understand it's fun, but certainly not worth getting a potentially deadly disease over, right? So, I mean, from a supply and demand perspective, you'd almost expect that Halloween costumes should be getting cheaper, right? What about, does anyone in the class bought a Chromebook in the past 2 months? Or like a new laptop? No one? Anyone?
I bought a new laptop.
What was when did you buy it? What was your experience like?
Like 2 weeks before school started, and
Ooh.
I got a MacBook.
Yeah.
And I went to the stores in Ala Moana and Hawaii, but they were sold
They're
out.
closed. Oh.
At the
Yeah.
time, I there's like a little window where I went where they weren't, but they were still sold out in stores. But it took like 4 days to ship the computer to me.
Okay. And certainly there weren't any like promotions or deals or anything like that, right?
No,
You just basically
there were.
paid. Oh, there were.
It was back to school sales.
So what'd you get?
A MacBook Pro.
No, but what did you get as a promotion or like a deal?
So it comes with any Mac purchase comes with AirPods, and you can upgrade to Pros for like $90.
So what'd you do? Are you rocking out some AirPods here?
I am. I got
Did you get it in? Did you get it engraved to Cody from Cody with love?
No, and also the if you remember, the school handed out some CARES Act money because a lot of people.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
a lot of people at our school specifically didn't claim it, so they just distributed it.
Yeah. Oh man, that's good, dude. But if you tried to buy it, let's say, I mean, I tried to buy a Chromebook just so everyone knows. Like, I don't know. Like, I like to blame my kid. Like, I had this Chromebook I had like 3 years ago. It worked fine until he played with it, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't charge. Nothing. Like, it doesn't turn on anymore. It won't charge. It's basically dead to the world. So then I had to try to find a new one. I went to Best Buy. I went to Sam's Club. I went to Costco. I even looked at Walmart. I looked at Target. So I looked at all of the stores that one could look at to try to find it. And either it wasn't in stock, or like the only ones that they had were like super fancy, like Google Pixel books that were like $1,000, right? And you're like, wow, a Chromebook $1,000? No way. But there, right, this other side of it was the other side of the demand and supply side, right? If every kid's got to go and do their education online, right? Especially for those who are like homeschooling, let's say, the school district might provide you your own Chromebook, but they might not, which would mean that parents have to go and buy one. So, when we think of that demand and supply side to it, we also have to think about the fact that people are buying stuff now like Chromebooks or even laptops more than they would have a year ago. Which brings me to this slide here. Think of all the things that we're buying in a COVID economy that are unlike what we would normally, right? So my oldest son just turned 7. I bought him a bicycle, and it was like next to impossible to find one on the islands. The only place I could get one was at McCully's, right? And McCully's is not cheap at all. So, right, and that was when they even had it in stock. Obviously, we see this with cleaning products, right? That they're very expensive, full price kinds of things. And then the kinds of things that people are not buying would be suits, airfares, hotel, right? The vending machine by my office. So if we think about that fixed basket of goods, I mean, I don't know how much airfare is in it, but let's say that it presumes that a person takes 3 trips a year, right? And in 2019, when they looked at airfares, let's say they found it for $500 round trip. But in 2020, when they looked at it, they found the same fares for $285 round trip. But with a fixed basket of goods, we always presume that people are actually taking 3 trips. So now notice that our budget goes down from $1,500 in 2019 $750, $820, $855 to approximately $855 in 2020. That's, I mean, right? So then you would say, wow, prices are going down. But in actuality, no one's flying, right? I mean, last time I flew was in February, and I haven't flown since, and I don't plan to for the rest of the year. You know, and it's very rare you find someone. I mean, the last person I knew that flew anywhere was Landgraf. Landgraf went back to Wisconsin for the summer, where she's originally from, where I'm from as well. But it sucked. Then I had to read her sad Facebook postings of like her being in quarantine, right? Like that's enough for me to not want to go anywhere. I don't want to have to be in quarantine. So what that means then, here's what I'll argue to you, is that the CPI data is a mirage. It's not what's actually happening. Right? Just like over here, right? Back over here, people were presumed to be taking still the same number of trips, buying house supplies, even though they were getting actually evicted from their house at the time. They were still buying cars. They were still buying new clothes for work when they actually weren't. So it means we need a better piece of data. We need some piece of data that allows us to track what's actually happening. Right, and then on this slide, and I'll post this as well for everyone to look at, but I basically just kind of break down what the actual numbers are. So the way that we, can everyone see my Bloomberg screen now? Yeah? Yes? No?
Yeah.
Yes?
We can see it.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Okay, good. Okay. So I'm going to look for the econ data of consumer price index. Again, I'm looking at an iPad version, so it's a little bit different than what you all have. Okay, so when I do a simple search in Bloomberg for inflation, the thing that they'll always emphasize is the CPI, just because that is the most popular quote of how to look at things. But that's not what actually economists look at. So I say that because the Federal Reserve has committed itself to 2% inflation. That's what they've committed to. So how do you measure that inflation? It's not with CPI. Instead, let's see here if we can get it here. Nope, I can't. So for our personal consumption expenditures, PCE, I want to do year to date, and I want to do a comparison. Look at it over the past year. Okay. This chart that I just kind of drew on the fly here represents the difference between personal consumption expenditures, which actually measures what people are spending, versus what does the CPI say. So the PCE, what people are actually spending, is in the white. The blue is what the fixed basket would indicate that people are spending. And look at that notable divergence that's growing since COVID basically started, which basically means even if the CPI data suggests that we don't have inflation, in fact, we've got inflation, we do have inflation. Prices increasing faster than what the CPI would suggest. So CPI is suggesting 1.3% inflation. PCE is suggesting 1.4% inflation. Now, why should we care about this? Is kind of the end question to this. And by far and away, what do I as an investor think about? Or even me as an economist, what do I think about? You have to think about inflation, because inflation is going to drive what the monetary policy is going to be. That monetary policy is going to drive what equity prices are and what bond prices are. So if you don't have a good handle on how prices are changing, you'll have no clue on what all the public policy is going to be. So, Claudia, what do you think? Right now, what do we know, given kind of the recession and COVID, what should we be doing in the economy? Should we be stimulating it with expansionary policy, or should we be slowing it down?
Oh,
Now go ahead, Claudia.
that's tough, honestly. Like factoring in, like partially, like with how the economy is right now, and also my own personal opinion and just whatever I understand about it. Personally, I feel that how we go about stimulating the economy with because we're kind of limited, but at the same time, some governments are trying to open up areas which are dangerous, I think, even though that is their...
Oh, that's true. That's true. Now, I guess I didn't think about that. You're right. But make this really simple. Think of what Cody just told us about his purchase of a MacBook. What did he say was one of the reasons that encouraged him to buy a really fancy new computer? Why did he do it? Yeah, what was the incentive? It wasn't just the free AirPods, but what was the other thing that gave him the extra boost to do it?
The CARES Act,
Yeah,
right?
the CARES Act, exactly.
Yeah.
The CARES Act, right? I mean, I look around campus, right? Like, the CARES Act funding, especially on the West Oahu campus, dude, it's like fucking crazy. Like, I've got like 2 webcams in my office, right? That they just like threw at me. I don't even need a webcam. You know, like anything you basically need, like to do like tech to basically teach, you know, distance teaching or distance learning, as kind of Cody's pointing out, right? It seems like there's CARES Act money to do it, right? So,
Right.
and you can use that CARES Act money to buy like, you know, cleaning supplies. You can use it to, I don't know, do a lot of stuff. Now, the intent of that CARES Act funding is to encourage, right, an institution, right, like West Oahu, right, which, you know, they, right, and have a pretty big budget cut looming, right, or to encourage Cody, right, who isn't exactly driving a Lamborghini to school. It encourages those individuals or those institutions to spend the money. And the one I just heard about yesterday was they were going to give unemployed people in Hawaii like a $500 gift card to restaurants, right? Same kind of thing, right? So people would use this debit card, and the motivation of it, right, is that they have to spend it. They can't just save it like many of us would do if we're just trying to, like, you know, preserve our bodies and, you know, squirrel away the $500 to something else. It's that $500 debit card for restaurants is like food stamps. Food stamps is an amazing stimulating device because, right, people that get food stamps have to spend it on food, and they typically spend it locally, and they spend it all that month and more, right, which is exactly what you know, that restaurant debit card would do. Now, we can quibble about the fact of, you know, if I don't have a job, should I be exactly going to, you know, Papa John's every day? Wouldn't it be better just to give me, you know, $500 more in food stamps so I could, you know, be better off to feed my whole family rather than eat pizza every night? But, right, let's not try to get into that, right? I mean, the intent is there of they're trying to say, let's stimulate the restaurant industry, which obviously is decimated in Hawaii by doing that. So, let me ask you this now, Clay, is my last question. So let's say all the people that are in Hawaii, so my understanding is that if you get an unemployment check in Hawaii right now, you're going to get a $500 debit card that you can only use at restaurants mailed to you. Now, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of being a restaurant owner. What are you going to do with respect to prices? Are you going to offer like a whole bunch of coupons to, like, you know, buy one entree, get one free? Are you going to keep prices the same, or are you going to raise prices?
Okay. Now knowing that,
Let's say
I think
let's say a year from now, just to make it even easier. Although it might not be easier when I say it. But what would you do a year from now, knowing that I've got this $500 gift card? Let's say I get it every month, and I'm going to use it every month, all $500. All the unemployed people in Hawaii are going to keep using their $500 debit card at restaurants. What are you, as the restaurant owner, going to do? Are you going to offer coupons? Are you going to make the price cheaper? Are you going to keep the prices the same, or are you going to raise prices?
I think I would keep prices the same.
And why is that?
You said this was.
There's not necessarily I mean, there is a kind of a right answer, but there's not necessarily a, you know, you can make a good argument for why something should be one way.
If the $500 is being handed out monthly, I think on average that's about how much people would spend, like if they were to dine out frequently. And also, I think another thing too is, like, just because people would get this money, like, they won't always go out. And it's also depends on which places they go to.
Well, I'm taking it a bit, let's put it this way, right? So food stamps, if you're a single person and you're getting food stamps, you get usually about $180 a month, maybe $200 a month in food stamps. You know, that's like a trip and a half to Costco, right? And you'd plow through that. So you're going to be left with about 2 weeks of no food. So now you're going to be going to the restaurant, right? You're going to be making lots of trips to the Cheesecake Factory, Papa John's, McDonald's. You're going for every day. I personally would get sick of it, but that's me. So, right, but I have to do it because I got to eat, right?
Right.
Now, all the other unemployed people are also using the restaurants, right? So now, let's say that everyone acts the same. Everyone spends their food stamps in the beginning of the month. Then when they run out of money, they use this debit card. So now, you go to the Cheesecake Factory when it opens at 11 o'clock, and there's a line, right, like 50 people long, right? And McDonald's, long drive-through. What are you, as the owner of the Cheesecake Factory, going to do? Keep the price the same, raise the price, or maintain the price?
Probably. Oof.
What do you do whenever someone's selling a popular product like they are, right? Because they have a restaurant. It's the only way people can get the food that they need to survive. So I know I've got power over people now as a Cheesecake Factory owner. I know people have to come to me to eat. I've got every table is super full. I'm selling a popular product.
Raise it because
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. No, exactly. Right. And that's exactly what you saw with Chromebooks, right? Because now Shiting, who's trying to buy one, am competing against school districts that are buying them all with their CARES Act money, right? And I'm competing against like rich parents that got, right? Everyone had $1,200 back in March, right? And so everyone was spending that $1,200 on bicycles, right? Which was a hard thing to buy. Chromebooks, right? Which were a hard thing to buy. Right, and then there's like fabric and sewing machines, and I don't know what this whole thing is about people baking their own bread, but apparently that was the big craze for a while, right? I mean, everyone seemed to be doing the same things, and they all had that $1,200 to do their thing with, and prices went up. So here's the thing. If we look at today's economy, the only thing that seems somewhat okay right now is the fact that we only had that one $1,200 stimulus way back in March, right? And we haven't stimulated it since then. So even though the economy is doing poorly, by not stimulating it more, that's the only way we've been able to keep inflation a little bit lower. But now, let's take this a little bit further. What if, again, I hate to talk about politics in this, but it's going to play a role in this. Let's say that Biden wins. Let's say that the Democrats keep the House and the Democrats take the Senate, meaning that we have a Democratic sweep of all the houses and of the presidency. We would expect that probably one of the things they would do is say everyone gets like $5,000, right, or some huge big number, right? I mean, as sad as it seems, right? I mean, I'm a state employee, and right now the state to pay its bills is not funding. So the way that my pension as a state employee is funded is I have to put up about a third of the pension contribution, and the state is supposed to put up 2/3 of the contribution. Think of it like a 401k match. So I have to put in mine every 2 weeks when I get paid. I have to make my contribution. My contribution is about 10% of my pay. But the state's not paying it anymore, right? So when I'm 65, obviously the state's going to be wishing they had put that money in, and obviously they haven't. And they're kind of hoping that the federal government, that if Biden wins and the Democrats sweep everything, that the state will be able to ask the federal government for the contribution, and the state will be able to say, "Hey, we're like $10 billion short this year. Can you just give us $10 billion, right?" And right now, unemployment runs out after 26 weeks. Well, maybe they're going to say, right, to the federal government, "Hey, we want funding after week 26." right? Or food stamps, right? Maybe they'll say we want people to get more food stamps. Or maybe they'll say, Pierce, stop. Hey, Pierce, stop. Stop. Whoa. Sorry about that. So if the Democrats sweep everything, that's actually going to be very bad for inflation because we'd have to expect that the one result of that would be more and more stimulation. Cheers. Stop. Cheers. There'd be more and more stimulation, which would be more and more inflation. Now, let's say that the Republicans win, because they win everything. Sorry, my headphones keep falling out. Let's say that the Republicans win everything. Then Republicans are probably going to say, again, I'm aggrandizing here. It's not actually the case. I don't care what your politics are. You shouldn't care what mine are. This should be obvious by this point. Let's say the Republicans win everything, and they're like, fuck you, right? Like no one gets anything. We're not giving anyone any more money. We're just going to do tax cuts, right? So because rich people like tax cuts, right? So they're going to say we want lots of tax cuts, but no one gets $1,200. No one gets anything. When your unemployment runs out, tough luck, right? Marry rich, right? It's just the way it is. Now, if that's what the federal government does, then the central bank, meaning the Federal Reserve, might intervene and say, okay, well, obviously the federal government's not going to do anything. So now we need to step in and do expansionary monetary policy, lower the interest rates. I was mentioning this on Tuesday. I'm in the market to buy a house right now, and mortgage rates are like crazy low right now. The rate I was offered on a jumbo loan was 2.875%. I don't even know how bank makes money on 2.875% because over 30 years, I think the inflation rate is going to be higher than 2.875. So that would mean they're going to lose money on that transaction. But the reason why it is so low, this is with Navy Federal, the reason why that rate is so low is because banks have tons of money. They have money sitting around that they basically, the money supply has just increased so dramatically by the Federal Reserve. So they're wanting customers, they don't have enough customers to lend money to, right? And, I've been going to these open houses and there's like lines of like 10, 15 people all wanting to buy a house because everyone can get easy access to loans, right? So now we're just seeing stimulation in terms of monetary policy. Now, the reason why I say this is because what if we don't get either situation? What if it's not that the Democrats sweep everything? And what if the Republicans don't sweep everything? Well, what if it's mixed? Let's say that the Republicans keep the Senate, the Democrats keep the House, and let's say that Biden wins. Okay? So now it's going to be mixed, right? Like maybe you'll get a stimulus, maybe you won't. Maybe unemployment would be increased, maybe it won't. But how does the Federal Reserve react to that now is even less clear, right? Like, okay, so the stimulus doesn't get passed. So then the Federal Reserve is like, okay, I guess we got to do the work. They increase the money supply to stimulate the economy. And then all of a sudden, Biden says, I don't care what people want. I'm just going to, stimulate the economy on my own. Now we've overstimulated it. It's going to be very difficult. I mean, what I'm interested in about the election is the way that it's going to complicate stimulating the economy in what is clearly a recession right now. And I think, and this is my assessment of the situation, I think that it's more likely than not that it will not be coordinated, meaning that either the Federal Reserve, the central bank, will stimulate when they shouldn't because the federal government is stimulating, or vice versa, that the federal government will stimulate and the Federal Reserve won't when it shouldn't be. And so because there isn't going to be that coordination, what you're going to see is that both the white line and the blue line are going to shoot up well past 2%, which is what the long-term inflation rate is supposed to be. And to the extent that it does, right, that when I locked in this mortgage interest rate of 2.875, I just had to tell myself, it's just more likely than not, I as a borrower am going to win, and savers are obviously losing because they're getting less after adjusting for inflation. And the reason why we need to care about this all, let's go back to this. Is this last point that I put right here. Everything depends on when is the Federal Reserve going to start trying to slow the economy down. The expectation right now is 2024. Hey, Pierce, you ripped the book. Hey, kid. Hey. Oh, man, kid. Oh, well, it's not a library book, everyone, so don't worry. Although I'm sure you'll learn. Yeah, the book is ripped. No, that sucks. Sorry, everyone. I'm trying to save the Pete the Cat book. Here, how about this? How about this book? Whoa! A book was just thrown, everyone. How about this book? Oh, a second book was thrown, everyone. What about this book? Oh, third book was thrown. Oh, I know. This one's good for all of you. This book I had as a kid, it's like bedtime stories, but it's like Bible bedtime stories. So it's like lions and, I don't know, Satan and stuff like that. You threw that book too, so I don't know what that means. Probably means bad things. Okay. I saved the Pete. Oh, he's reading the Bible bedtime stories book. Oh, God, what do you think? Bernie, do you think that means it's going to be bad if he rips the Bible bedtime stories book? What do you think, Bernice? Yeah.
I think so.
Right? I mean, that's like as bad as like ripping the Bible, isn't it?
Yeah.
But isn't like intent part of it, right? I don't think like a 2-year-old would know. Probably, right? As opposed to, I mean, it's not like God wrote it either, right? It's like a regular author wrote it. And it's just inspired by the Bible. Yeah. Oh, come on. Leave Pete the Cat out of this. Don't deal with it. Here, do this one. Do this one. Here, take this one. Curious George and Happy Halloween. Yeah, take that one. There you go, kid. Yeah. You'd be all amazed, my friends, that they let someone like me be a father. I don't know. Yeah, okay. The question's going to be, can the Federal Reserve maintain that 2% rate? And I'm saying that I don't think so. I don't think there's any way at all that they're going to be able to maintain that 2% rate, because there's going to be no coordination between what politicians in the federal government are doing and what policymakers within the Federal Reserve are doing. I just don't think it's going to be possible to do that. And so the expectation would be is that we're going to see dramatically higher inflation over the course of the 2020s. And obviously we're only in 2020 right now. So basically, right, in a high inflationary environment, those who are hurt are savers, and those who benefit are borrowers. That's obviously going to impact. Inflation makes an economy perform poorly because it makes things unpredictable. I'm trying to think of who's. Andrew, aren't you the oldest person in this class? How old are you, Andrew? Besides me, I'm the oldest. I'm 43. Safe space. Andrew, how old are you, dude?
24.
24. Oh, I thought for some reason you were. Okay. Well, okay. Let's just deal with me. I'm the oldest. I don't think anyone's older than me in this class. I'm 43 years old. Being 43 years old, I have only an incredibly distant memory of inflation. And it's the only memory I have of inflation is 1982. I remember I was 5 years old, and I remember my father. He became unemployed because the factory he was working at shut down, and I just remember that we had to. It wasn't like for some of you who read me in other classes, back in the day, like back in the 1980s, yeah, there were food stamps, but there was this like other thing too, where like the government bought like all this extra food and then they packaged it as their own. I showed this to the other class, and people were surprised that the government did this, but it really sucked. There was a long time where I didn't even like peanut butter, because the first time I had it was government peanut butter, and it basically didn't look like that. Not that. Yeah, here it is. No, sorry, not that. The cheese did look like this though. So just think about that. Government cheese. It looks really bad, and it tasted horrible. I guess that's what this picture's even saying, is it tasted horrible. It was really, really bad. And the reason why even that, like why we had to eat that as a family, was because the high inflationary environment led to corporate customers not making factory orders, which put my dad out of work, right? And then when he doesn't have a job, he's certainly not going to go out and be buying like cheese and extra food like that. So the net result of that was, right, inflation destabilized the economy. Oh, there it is. Oh, those motherfuckers. Yeah, oh man, this stuff sucked. This looks like an older can. This looks like from 1965, but it still sucked. It tasted horrible. Was this kind of like the can I had? No, it sucked. Yay. So the reason why I'm saying this is because I'm 43 years old, and the last time we had serious inflation was 37 years ago. Meaning that there's huge segments of the economy that aren't adjusted to the fact that prices could increase, but also increase in an unexpected fashion. Right? The beauty of Costco is that the hot dog and soda is always $1.50, right? That the pizza slice is, right, it's always $2. That the pizza itself is $10, right? There's a beauty to that almost constant price. But also there's a beauty to the fact that even with most products just increase on an annual basis, like 1% or 2%. And like you can grumble a bit, but it's just kind of predictable. Well, what if the price went up 20% in 1 year, right? Just like construction costs did here on the islands after they started building rail. Well, now, right, people don't expand their houses. People don't renovate their houses because things are unpredictable. And with that unpredictability, the economy then suffers. And so that's what we're going to see here, right? And I don't even think we can, if we look over time, CPI and PCE do closely track each other until now they're diverging under COVID. And that's going to be the problem that we're going to see. And I would predict that that problem is going to grow, and that's going to become even more severe as we see inflation caused by policies being different. Okay, that leads me to the slides. So I'm going to start here by asking if there's any questions about what I just talked about. Now, none of that's on the exam. all of what I just talked about is kind of just for your information, your just general understanding of inflation. But does anyone have any questions about either what's going on in the economy today that might be linked to inflation or anything that I talked about? Anything at all? I'm not looking at the chat, so if someone's chatting, I will not be able to see that you are chatting. Okay. So let's start looking at this. If you do have a question, just say something. Sorry, my son's getting in trouble here. Pierce, what are you doing? Okay. I'll give you a popsicle. Inflation, again, being this notion that prices go up over time. To some extent, economists don't worry about inflation because inflation happens because if we put price on the y-axis and quantity on the x-axis, that for whatever reason, right, if more people start buying the product and demand increases, like when we were talking about like bikes, right, or Chromebooks, then the demand increased and prices increased. So, right, so what's wrong with inflation there? Inflation is just a reflection of the market changing. Markets being flexible, so in fact, it's a good thing, right? So even though there were minor instances where a product isn't on the shelf, you could still probably always buy it. You just had to pay a higher price to buy it. Now, again, there's a problem with inflation. It does impose social costs. Again, savers are generally hurt by inflation. Borrowers are generally helped by inflation. But there's also this idea that what's really important as well is whether it's expected or unexpected. So what I'm arguing to you, like when I was talking about like, does Biden win? Do the Democrats win? Do the Republicans win? All of that, I mean, I don't know what the future holds. You know, if you saw that debate on Tuesday, I mean, I watched it. I don't know. I mean, it seemed pretty screwed up to me, but what do I know? I mean, it's all on the mainland, so like, people on the mainland are pretty crazy. But if that's what our future holds, I don't understand why a bank can be lending out money then for 30 years when like that election could have such severe consequences to the lending market and what inflation is going to be. Whereas if we said, let's vote a robot to be president, dude, that'd be great because all inflation will probably be expected because robots just follow programs, right? They just follow software commands. And we would know exactly how a robot would react to something happening. Let's look at this. So when I was talking to my mother today, if you want a fun fact about me, I talk to my parents every day. I was telling them about buying a house and the idea of that. And they told me that, they reminded me, I've known it though for a while, that their very first mortgage, my father was in the Army, he got a VA mortgage that had a 14% interest rate in 1979. So his first house he was ever buying, interest rate on the mortgage was 14%. And that's like a super safe mortgage, right? That's the VA is backing the loan. So there was no risk of default or anything like that. The VA would come in and pick that up, but he had to pay 14%. And the bank had to charge that because the inflation rate was 10%. Because the 14% is the nominal rate. So that's what you have to pay the bank, 14%. But the bank gets paid 14%, but that money loses 10% of its value, so minus 10%, because of inflation. Meaning it's only got 4% left over. And that's how it like pays its bills. The bank pays the bills, hires the workers, pays the mortgages of people who are bums and, didn't actually pay anything. And when you have inflation going up 10% a year, the economy stops. Because again, just like deflation, in rampant inflation, people just delay buying things, or they rapidly buy things and like store things longer than they should. If we look at the world that we live in today, again, I was born in 77 here. And as much as I like to think I could remember inflation when I was born, I do not. And certainly all of you, millennials and Gen Z or whatever, there's been a downward trend in inflation until recently. Yet, we see this curious increase here caused by monetary and fiscal stimulus because of the crisis in 2008, 2009. So if you just take that further, right, you'd almost have to expect, right, as we get into a COVID environment, again, what I'm arguing is that it's only going to go higher and higher and higher. Now, what controls much of this, the way that we understand inflation, like what causes inflation, is the growth rate of the money supply. But how you connect those two concepts has to do with velocity. Okay, so here's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to link the changes in the money supply and their relationship to changes in prices. Right? What is that relationship? What I'm saying to you is that velocity, the term velocity, is contained within that relationship, how we translate money supply to prices. More specifically, what velocity is, what its definition is it's how often does a dollar bill go through the economy in a year. In the United States, a dollar bill circulates through the economy in a year about 7 times, meaning that a dollar bill changes hands on average about 7 times over the course of the year. Here's some data from 2015. There were $500 billion in transactions based on $100 billion in money supply. So for $100 billion to generate $500 billion in transactions, on average, the money had to have been spent about 5 times. So what that means is that the velocity is the way that we can say what money supply is needed to support a $500 billion economy in this example. So the velocity then is the total value of the transactions over the money supply, which is 5. And what we can do is start to put in data that we know. So the nominal GDP is going to be our numerator. So this P times Y, we are saying is equal to T. So all that we're doing here is changing this T to P times Y. We're keeping M as it is. What is price? Price is going to be measured with our GDP deflator. Y is going to be the real GDP. So P times Y, meaning the GDP deflator times real GDP, is my nominal GDP. In the nominal, again, we're allowing the price to change. In the real, prices stay constant. Taking that a little bit further here, let's rearrange these terms. So let's cross multiply here, M times V, right here, and keep the P times Y here. Now we've got the classic identity equation, the quantity equation. If you're an internet kind of person and you're looking this up on Google, you may see it listed as MV equals PQ. This is the quantity equation. It's the way that we understand money supply and the relationship again to inflation. It allows me to track how is this changing, the money supply, to how is this changing, the P. Any questions so far of where I'm going with this mathematically? Again, if you like Khan Academy or you like Wikipedia entries, this would be the quantity equation. Again, you may see it as MV equals PQ. It's the same thing as MV equals PY. It's not any different. Okay, now let's divide M by P. What that would give us is something known as the real money balance, meaning what is the purchasing power of that money supply? It's going to give us some level of what the price level is in the economy. And what it does for us is it gives us a money demand function. Because if we know how much the money supply, how much stuff it can buy, that's going to be a notion of how much money we think we need then, right? Because that's how much we need to buy stuff. That's our demand curve for money. Then we're going to say that, let's say, for instance, people always hold 30% of their total income in their savings account. That's like that. What this is saying here. Right? If this were an individual, their Y, their income would be their paycheck. And they would be saying, I save 30% of it, right? That's how much or that's how much, in this case, how much money I hold. I guess I keep $30 for every $100 in my wallet. So K isn't savings rate. K is the desire to hold cash, right? Old people love to carry cash. I've got, I just turned in plastic bottles today, so I have $6. Right, but I almost never carry cash. Whereas we know, right, ask your grandparents for money, they probably got like, I don't know, $5,000 sitting in their wallet. Well, not really, but they probably got a lot. Okay, that K function, that exogenous function here that's saying how much people hold, is determined by the inverse of the velocity, 1 over v. And what that means here, why do people sometimes hold a lot of cash? They would do it if the velocity is very small. And they might do it if their income is very high. Now, in the lead up to, let's see here how far I want to go on this. Just seeing how far I want to go on this. Because I'm not going to do 61 slides here. Let me do this. Okay. Let's go back to our original quantity equation. MV equals PQ or MV PY. Let's assume that the velocity is constant. That over the long term, money's always changed hands about 7 times over the year. And that's just the way it is. Okay, so let's just throw 7 in there. Okay, let's put the price level in there. But what I'm also going to argue is that the Y is fixed as well. And we're going to assume this, because remember back from macro, the PPF, production possibilities frontier, what if you can draw it and on that is the natural GDP, meaning the natural production levels of the economy. Meaning over the long run, the economy is going to be stuck at the natural GDP, which means right here. And now I'm fixing my V, that's constant as well. Now look at it. Now you get 1-to-1 changes between M and P because the velocity is constant and the real GDP is constant. Meaning if velocity is constant and if the real GDP is constant, then the consequence is 1-to-1 changes in the money supply with changes in the prices. Would you agree with that, Truman?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't even know what to say.
Yes, see? Well, what letter is that?
What letter is what? M, V, P, Y.
See, you're a good economist. Unfortunately for all of you in class, your questions will be more difficult than that. So let me repeat this again. In this quantity equation, MV equals PY, the velocity, let's just say it's constant because it's like psychologically based. Let's say that the Y is also fixed because you get to a point on the PPF, the production possibilities frontier, that's known as the natural GDP. And that would be right here. So if the production is fixed and the velocity is fixed, then every 1 unit change in the money supply will lead to a 1 unit change in the price level on the right-hand side of the equation. Going back to over here, right? We now have an understanding of what is the relationship between the money supply to the price. That's a 1-to-1 ratio. In this simple quantity theory of money, that is the relationship between the two. Okay, it's 6:21 right now. Some of you may have questions, but let's pause right here since I've been talking for 80 minutes. I'm going to pause the video at this point and I'll pause the recording and I'll come back on at 6:30. Okay, so I'll pause the recording here and we'll all be back on at 6:30. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go back to where I left off. And I want to skip ahead here just because, in the interest of time, you can read this. Now, it turns out that this is, don't worry too much about this. It's missing some of the triangles here. I'll add them for you. But let me jump to the conclusion here, just in the interest of time. The conclusion of the quantity theory of money, which again is this idea of MV equals PQ, where the Q is constant because over the long run the economy is on the PPF, and that the V is constant because for psychological reasons, any number of reasons, money only changes hand a constant number of times a year. That again, it's a 1-to-1 ratio between the money supply and the price in the economy, the change in prices in the economy. Well, one of then the consequences of this, as highlighted in slide 18 here, is that in an economy where they grow the money supply too high, those countries should have higher inflation rates. Makes sense. Or you can go the other way, right? If you look at the country's inflation rate, it should generally follow the trend of how the money is growing. And if we look at the data, it's actually pretty true that in economies, for the most part, that grow the money supply very little, they also have very low inflation. And that in economies where they grow the money supply a lot, the inflation rate is very high. So it's generally the case. Now, it's not a 45-degree line, but it does increase. Now, let's look at it in the case of the United States. That as we grow the money supply over time, we do see inflation. And that when we decrease the money supply, we see prices going down. So when my father lost his job back in 1982, courtesy of really high inflation, it was a consequence of the fact that throughout the 1970s and even the 1960s, the money supply grew too quickly. And it caused this increase in prices that could only be resolved by the Federal Reserve coming in the 1980s and saying, wow, we got to really fix this economy. The only way we can fix the economy is by lowering inflation. And what is the only thing they can do to lower inflation? Change the money supply, decrease it, right? So in some sense, in 1979, let's say, the realization was that prices are too high. The only thing you can do to solve this is lowering the money supply. Now, what effect does lowering the money supply have on the economy? Let's go back to here. So what is the effect that it has? What do you think, Cody? Yeah.
It decreases consumer spending. Exactly.
And investment spending and everything else. It basically, oh, now I can see all this chat where no one could see anything. Oh man, that sucked. Sorry, gang. It wasn't working. Yeah, it basically, the
That
Federal
would
Reserve.
increase
Oh, go on.
individual savings, I would assume, at the same time.
Um, it it the inflation, is that what you're saying, or the
Uh,
solution to the savings?
no,
The
decreasing
inflation.
money supply.
Um, yeah, I mean, sometimes, my wife has clients where they talk about like, oh, I used to get like 7% interest on my savings account, right? And it obviously is referring back to, the 1980s, when that was the recurring rate. But the reason why it doesn't necessarily lead to an increase in savings is because people are out of work, right? So they're spending what little they have on just surviving. So, for the most part, what you're seeing is that um, when you're driving uh, the economy in a situation where you have high inflation, you basically have to push the economy into a recession to slow things down and thus slow down the increase in prices. And it works, right? Because by 1984, 1985, inflation was gone, disappeared, and really wasn't seen again, um, because of that deliberate pushing of the economy into recession, where people said, "I'm not going to spend my money. Why would I want to do that?" And firms said, "Why would I spend my money?" It's just that it's a very difficult thing to do because um, you're basically intentionally causing harm. And that's obviously a painful thing to do. And it takes a lot of willpower. And what I'm betting on as an investor or as a borrower is I don't think the people are going to have the stamina to allow, for instance, Jerome Powell to push the economy intentionally into a recession. Okay. So we see the same things here. As the money supply grows, here, prices change in the same direction. Now, when the government runs into problems, typically, is based on the fact that, so in a country like Venezuela or in a country like the Congo, um, the reason why these countries, or in the case of classic Zimbabwe, the reason why these economies had problems is because the government had lingering problems of how to pay all their obligations. So their solution was, well, print more cash. So they printed more cash to be able to pay their bills, something that economists call seigniorage. So seigniorage would be basically, right, in the United States, for instance, we do not do this. If the government wants to spend more money, they have to either borrow it or raise taxes. We don't just print more money. The federal government is not empowered to change the money supply. That's the job of the Federal Reserve. And the reason why there's that separation is because if we left it up to politicians to print money, gave them that power, that's all they'd ever do, right? Because it's easier to do that than raise taxes. Yet that act of kind of like delaying the problem by just saying, we'll just print more cash, does tax the rest of the economy with what's kind of informally we can call an inflation tax. People pay for it one way or the other, either through higher taxes or the fact that everything has gone up in price because the government recklessly just printed more cash. This happens so often in developing economies, and it's the biggest concern, really. You need an independent central bank to avoid this situation. Quite honestly, the reason why the money supply grew so much here, right here, is because unfortunately in the 1960s we had one of the worst Federal Reserve chairmen, Arthur Burns. Arthur Burns was this, how do you describe it? He was very conservative, which wasn't his fault. But the problem was that then Nixon came into office, and Nixon basically convinced Arthur Burns to like help him out in like Vietnam and help him out with all these like social problems. So he said to Arthur Burns, print a lot of cash. And Arthur Burns was like, okay. And so Arthur Burns then dramatically increased the money supply. Richard Nixon then obviously wins the second term because the economy seems to be doing well. But then inflation takes hold, right? So right here, you see this little curious little fall right there? That's right around the time of Nixon getting reelected, 1972. So he gets reelected because inflation seems to be coming down, but then it just dramatically increases. Right, once Nixon takes office during his second term, before he resigns. And it takes Arthur Burns having to be basically fired. He wasn't renominated, and then he became the ambassador to West Germany, and then he died in the 80s. But then Arthur Burns had to be replaced. But he had to be replaced by a Federal Reserve chairman who was going to be demanding enough to basically say to a politician, I'm going to intentionally put the economy into recession to save it. And so fortunately for the United States, the worst Federal Reserve chairman, Arthur Burns, was followed by the best Federal Reserve chairman we've ever had, Paul Volcker. And Paul Volcker was independent enough and fierce enough and strong enough to push the economy into a recession and solve this problem forever. Paul Volcker was replaced in 1987 with Alan Greenspan. And Alan Greenspan was replaced in 2000. Hey, Pierce, come here. Come here. Or go to mommy. Sorry, everyone. Hey, come here. You want to sit on my lap? Come here. Thank you all. That's about what the mortgage rate was that I was offered. And you see these like crazy low like savings rates that are like, 0.001%, let's say, or something like that. But again, the reason why this number seems so attractive, right, is because if I even expect 3% inflation, then the real interest rate, meaning the adjusted for inflation rate, is going to be negative, which basically means I'm going to get paid after inflation to have done that, to have borrowed money. Or in the case where the savings rate is very low, where the savings rate is very low, those individuals right, are in a situation where in real terms, now in this case, the borrower would be gaining money. In this case, the saver is losing money. So that's the meaning of that negative sign. They're losing their money, yet they're still insisting on saving their money in that kind of thing. This notion of what I'm describing here, where I'm taking the real interest rate and I'm determining it by subtracting the nominal rate and taking the nominal rate and subtracting inflation, that's called the Fisher effect, named after Irving Fisher, one of the greatest economists in the 20th century, 1900s. And we see this kind of one-to-one relationship between changing the inflation rate and changing the interest rate, the nominal interest rate. As inflation goes up, interest rates would have to go up, meaning someone borrowing money for a house 10 years from now, or someone saving in a savings account 10 years from now, will probably get a higher rate or pay a higher rate because inflation will make that number go higher, as according to the Fisher effect. And you absolutely see this in the data. That as the inflation rate goes up, the nominal interest rate goes up. And as they go down, they go down. And the only exception to this really is this artificially low point where the interest rate has been basically right around zero. Yet we've had some positive inflation. And it also holds globally. That the higher the inflation rate, the higher the nominal interest rate. Okay, I'm going to skip this in the interest of time. What do I do here? I'm not going to be able to cover this all today because this is just a longer section, and I did talk a lot about CPI versus PCE. Let me just talk a little bit about let me pose to you this question. Why was such a low rate offered? Right? Why was such a low interest rate offered? It wasn't done intentionally. Right? It wasn't done to screw the bank over. It all has to do with the fact that what are the expectations? And the bank is basically expecting they're expecting two things. They're expecting low inflation, and consequently related to that, that the money supply doesn't grow too crazy. And I don't think that's the case. So there's the divergence, right? They think one thing, right? And I say there's no way, right? I'm calling bullshit on that, and I think that that's not the case, that those two assumptions are not going to hold true. The only way we're going to find out who's correct, one of us is going to be right, one of us is going to be wrong. The only way, unfortunately, we're going to know that is, right, when the loan comes due, right, or when the CD, right, because you could buy a certificate of deposit when that comes due. That's the only time you're ever going to realize it. Which means that, again, we're trying to make a expectation between ex ante and ex post. Ex post is easy to make a prediction because you know exactly what it already is. It's the ex ante where you have to go on your gut and you have to make you have to take a stand on what you think is going to happen. Okay. What do I want to do here? So obviously, if I skip some things, it then becomes obviously less important for you to worry about for the exam. Let me kind of conclude today talking about the demand function for money, and then I'll kind of leave it there, I think. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Okay, so let's just do money demand here. The demand for money itself has to depend negatively on the interest rate. That's because, as some of you kind of point out, when the interest rate is, as Cody kind of pointed out, I think at one point, right? When interest rates are high, people then say, why would I want to spend so much money? I want to save it. I'm going to get a whole bunch of money for it. So if we look at people's demand for real money balances, that's what this is called. Demand for real money balances, M over P, superscript D. My demand for real money balances is going to equal some function based negatively on the interest rate and positively on the income levels. So my preference for liquidity that when interest rates are low, people have no problem holding lots of cash, because why would you care about putting it in the bank anyway? It pays like 0.00000001, so what's the big deal? Just hold it in your wallet. You're not losing very much. But also, rich people have lots of cash typically, because that's how they are, right? And they've got lots of stuff they have to buy. That's what this is saying. Negatively with the interest rate, positively with the level of income. That's my demand for real money balances. And we can break down what I is, the interest rate, into the real rate plus some level of which it could change, which would be expected. What's missing here is my inflation. The real rate plus expected inflation. And so when we put this together, where liquidity is a function of my real interest rate, expected inflation, and income levels, that's my demand for real money. Remember this equation from way back here? M over P. So my supply of real money balances equals my demand for real money balances. Equilibrium. So then the question is who's determining all of these aspects of the demand and the supply function for real money balances? Well, M is exogenous, meaning it's determined by the central bank. It's determined by the Federal Reserve. Well, the R, the real interest rate, is whatever you have as equilibrium in the savings market. Y, the production level, well, that's just based on what your capital stock and labor stock is. That's just your production function. And the price, P, is just adjusting based on your demand for real money balances. So, what do I want you to kind of get from this? You know, all these equations you're kind of seeing here. Probably the biggest thing I guess I want you to see from this is how, even though many of you don't really think about inflation very much because you don't see it very much, it's incredibly important for investors, but it's also incredibly important for all of us who have, on some level, are faced with saving and borrowing decisions, right? And right, for anyone who's thinking of taking out a mortgage, which is a 30-year commitment, you have to have some very basic notion of what you think inflation is going to be like if you're going to enter into a 30-year contract with a bank to pay them back. And if you were a business, right, you'd have to have some notion about what you think the inflation rate is going to be if you're going to be hiring workers. Should we care? Let me just see how much farther I can go here. I might be able to. I think I can finish this. I think I can do this. I need someone to say, you can do this. Should we care about inflation? Is it really a social problem? In the United States, it's not. And the reason why it's not is because it's totally and wholly expected. The rate is pretty much known. Again, I don't think that's the case over the next 30 years. Navy Federal thinks that is the case over the next 30 years, which is why they're offering me a very low interest rate mortgage. I think that there's going to be unexpected inflation. And that's what you, where you get into more problems. Let's look at what some of the costs are of expected inflation. So in our case, expected inflation in the United States is 2%. That is about what the long run inflation rate is in the United States. Well, one consequence of the fact that prices go up 2% a year is that basically people have to run around a lot more to try to spend their money because it's obviously losing value 2% every year. So people basically wear out their shoes. That's called the shoe leather cost. So people basically run around and basically wear down their shoes trying to spend all their money. The higher the inflation, the more the shoe leather costs will be. So obviously there's not a lot of people just doing it for 2%, but if the inflation rate was 15%, I'm sure we'd all be going out there right now and like going from one Target to another, from east to west on the island, trying to spend all of our money and buying all the stuff that's out there. Another cost of inflation is the fact that businesses incur costs every time they change prices, right? Like they have to print a new catalog or they have to print a new menu. And that obviously costs something. Not to date myself, but I wouldn't say I was born before barcodes were on products, but I'm not sure barcodes were that popular when I was a kid growing up. And so what that meant is that if you wanted to say what the price was of a product at the grocery store, someone actually had they'd put this like little sticker on each good to like stamp it what the price was, or they'd have to like hand draw it in with a crayon. So obviously every time you're changing the price, you'd have to you'd have to print a new price on each and every item you're selling, right? Whereas when Target wants to change the price on their products, they don't change the barcodes, they just change what the barcode says as the price. So menu costs have gone down dramatically courtesy of technology. Let's just focus on those two. I mean, these other factors exist, but I don't want to focus too much of my attention on it. The biggest problems, though, in an economy occur when the inflation is unexpected. And the reason why is because it's arbitrary. Right? So right now I'm a borrower, I'm a hardcore borrower. And there's some little old person who saved their money that I'm using to borrow, right? And if I actually win my bet and inflation ends up being higher than expected, then that old person is going to have lost out because they saved at a fixed interest rate and I borrowed at a fixed interest rate based on an expected inflation rate. If the actual inflation rate is higher than expected, then the borrower wins and the lender loses. And opposite, if it turns out the other way. We'll see who's right. Oh, look at that. Trump says he and Flotus tested positive for COVID-19. Oh, that's like really fucked up, huh? I wonder what the markets will say. Oh, dude, this is really cool. Let's see. What do the markets say? Is anyone still in the class? I can't even see when anyone's here. You guys could all be gone right now and I'd have no idea. Oh, there's still some people here. I don't know, Claudia, what do you think, dude? Or anyone.
Sorry. About
It's saying Trump and the First Lady have COVID-19. And I was saying, wow, it's going to probably have some impact on the market, right? You would think. I mean, he's not exactly the healthiest of people, right?
was it confirmed or?
Yeah, that's what it's saying right now.
Yikes.
So fortunately, because of Bloomberg, we get the most up-to-date data here, or most up-to-date information. Ooh, let's see. Where's the source of information?
Okay. See, I feel like.
No, he just sent a tweet. Wait, so does anyone follow his tweets? I don't, because it just seems.
I just looked it up, and there's various news sources saying that his aide got it, and so so he's in the quarantine process. So it's
no,
not,
but see, it says right here. It says he just sent a tweet out. Let's see it. So let's look at his tweet. Yeah, so he did get it.
Oh.
Wow. Oh, people are very mean on Twitter. Wow.
I feel like now, and it's sad that it had to come to this is just my speculation, but I feel like if anything, he would probably push like even more than he, I guess, however much he already is right now. But Trump would probably push to like look for a vaccine kind of thing, because it's like, oh crap, I'm involved, that kind of thing. So, yeah, because you know, some people, it's like it takes for them to experience whatever's happening in order for them to.
Exactly. No,
that's my speculation. So
no, I hear you. I hear you.
see.
I hear you. Wow, look at this, man. Twitter is so mean to everybody. Look at that. Or maybe they're just mean to people that are mean otherwise, or.
This will excuse him from a debate or something.
Yeah, right. Because isn't he supposed to be like really tired now or something? Or I don't know. No. No. Yeah. So look at that. So if he's saying that just now, wow! Look at all the followers he has. Look how many people he follows. Only 50 people. He has sent 56,614 tweets. That's crazy. Who's got that kind of time? He's supposed to be the president.
He was like, apparently his account was tweeting during the debate. So.
Really?
Yeah. Apparently, a couple tweets were tweeted from his account during the debate.
How's that possible?
Yeah. So now people are saying that someone else runs the account.
Oh, how cool is that, huh? Interesting. Whoa, it's breaking news. See, look at this. Yeah. Markets are down a lot. Oh, good thing. I told I don't want anyone to think I'm a market genius. I really don't want anyone to think that. But I obviously just spent a lot of money on a mortgage, and I told my wife today, It was like 9 a.m. and the markets closed at 10. I was like, I don't care what you do. I want you to sell what you got to sell today so we can put down the down payment, because we put down like 20%. I was like, you got to sell what you can today because I want to be out of it and I want to have the cash available. Good thing I did, because look at that. Fuck, I'd be like living with you, Cody. Don't you already have roommates?
No, I'm still with my parents.
Oh, did you have a room for me and my kids? My wife? Is there a room for me?
Standards are.
Pretty low. I mean, I don't have air conditioning or anything right now. Is there an extra room?
Can you and your family live like Harry Potter?
Well, how about this? We'll live in. My wife and I each drive a Prius. Can we just park in your driveway?
I suppose so.
Thank you. So I guess the interesting thing here will be what effect this has on the market. Interesting. It almost makes me feel like I can't even. Let's look at what the markets are doing now. Equity futures. Let's go and look at this. So let's see, who would be open right now? Europe would be opening here pretty soon. The Nikkei's. Australia would be, yeah, Australia and East Asia would be open right now. Wow. Exciting news, huh? Okay, so futures are down in the UK. Futures are down in the US. They're down in Germany. They're down in Spain. They're down in Switzerland. Down in the UK. They're down. The Nikkei is down, so they're down in Japan. They're down in China. No, they're up in China. China's closed right now, so the index is up for the future. Oh, that's so cool, huh? Cool stuff. Okay, so let's see this. I don't know how we'll do this. Can you all see my screen still? Yes?
No, we cannot.
Oh, see? Good thing I said something. Now can you? Yes?
Yes.
Perfect, okay. So what I was looking at here was I was looking at this idea of Trump, who was tweeting that he was sick. And oh man, you know what I would be thinking of if I was Trump? I'd be wondering, did my wife get me sick or did I get her sick? Does anyone want to make a guess? I don't know, but I like thinking that. I like when I get sick, thinking who got me sick, like doing my own contact tracing, basically. I guess his aide got him sick, right? Or, I mean, right? Who's to say he didn't get Hope Hicks sick, right? I don't know. Anyway, what I was looking at before, when I wasn't showing you the screen, was I was looking at the futures, and the futures are pretty much going to start to be going negative here. And the last thing I was going to show, even though I didn't finish the slides here, I now seem to be completely and wholly distracted by, yeah, see, look at that. Dow Jones down almost 500, NASDAQ down almost 200.
Alongside the Dow Jones and NASDAQ futures as well.
So what are you
Recap
saying? I
some
should
of
sell
the
my
news
stocks
we
right
have
now?
this morning. The President of the
So what?
United States,
Are you saying
President
I should
Donald
sell some
Trump,
stocks
and
right now?
First Lady Melania Trump
Oh, I'm
have
sorry, I
both
still couldn't hear you for a
tested
second.
positive for COVID-19.
Are you saying I
That
should sell
immediate
some
market
stocks
reaction.
right now?
Of course, we wish anyone
No,
that
I
is
mean, I
facing
think if
this
anything, you should
virus
short
health
something.
and safety, especially
right? Because,
in the White House.
dude, he's not
US
like,
President's physician has said he
I guess I'm kind of being like
watch on
Claudia or
president
someone
who's
else
now
here. Like, I'm trying to
quarantined,
hedge
and
what
he
I'm
says
about
that
to say, so
President Trump
I
and
don't mean
Melania
ill
are
will on
both
anyone.
well.
I don't even
Still
care
with us this morning,
if it's
Frederic
someone I
Carrier,
disagree
head
with.
of
Obviously, I
investment
don't mean
strategy
ill
at
will on
RBC
anyone, but
Wealth Management.
I mean, I think
Frederic,
some of you
just
could
digesting all this,
kind
this
of agree with
immediate
me. We're not
market
talking about like,
impact. As
you
I said to you
know,
before, it doesn't seem like
the
anything
most
else will really
healthiest
matter
of
today, even though we have
individuals,
those
right? I
jobs
mean,
numbers, we didn't get a fiscal deal.
he
Does
doesn't
this start to now
strike me as
shift how you
incredibly
think
healthy,
about the
right?
U.S.
And so this is
election and where
obviously
you might
very
want
hard
to,
on the
where
old, this
one may want to put
disease,
money in
this
terms of a
illness,
portfolio?
um, you know, and I suspect the markets
It
are
doesn't.
accounting
Again,
for that.
our investment strategy is based on where we think market
Interesting
growth in the
news.
economy
Anyway,
is going to be over
there's
the
not much I can
next
follow up
6
on that.
months to
Then you know
12
the guy is sick,
months.
so
It's not based on day-to-day
that's the way it is.
trading.
In honor of Trump
There's
being
been
sick,
a pullback
that's
in
all in
September,
class today. And
that for us is
I'll post
a
the
good
video and
opportunity to build
I'll log
certain
off last, so we'll
positions
pick it up
in
from here.
equities.
Yeah, I don't know,
We
Cody.
think, as I've
Short the
mentioned,
market
that
or buy
prospects
some treasuries.
are better,
Okay,
risks
sounds
are
like things are going to be
more
on sale soon. So
Yeah, exactly. Sounds good. Okay, everyone. I will log off last. Great work today, guys.
see you later.
Thank you, Professor.
Thanks.
Have a great night.
Thanks. You too.